But what we're going to be doing is learning how to print with things you have in the kitchen. So embracing the spirit of this Culinary and Arts Festival. I understood the assignment, hopefully. That doesn't mean the work will work, but it means we'll have fun. We'll definitely get messy. I'll at least get messy up here. And we're going to think about how you can start doing some printmaking, specifically relief techniques and lithography techniques in your very own kitchen. So what we're going to start with, and I'll probably do a couple times to show you guys and to see if it works, is we're going to do kitchen lithography. And so the magic ingredient to do your kitchen lithography is Coca-Cola. Now, I'm really glad that Coca-Cola is here with their sugar-free Coke. However, it won't work for this. You need to get the original full sugar, full everything, full caffeine, full calories, Coca-Cola. So this is going to be something you'll want to have on hand if you want to do this in your own house. So mostly the challenge here is everything you can do to do lithography can be found in your own kitchen, your own home, with the exception of a couple little things. This little brayer here, if you want, you could always use a spoon, and I'll show you a bit of how to do that later, but first we're gonna just use one of these for ease. And then you do have to buy some ink. So you're gonna need to buy, this is block printing ink, and I won't hold it to the end, but this is the worst ink to use for this. So it's the best ink for me to buy on short notice, but it's the worst. It will work, but if you really want to get amazing, amazing prints, you love this technique and you really want to keep doing it at home, you're going to want to buy lithography ink. So usually you do have to special order that. So what else, the other ingredients, and I'll walk through the steps and you'll see everything. Just some good old vegetable oil. I brought this one from Canada. Forgot to mention I'm here from OCAD University, but my shirt will tell you that, from Toronto, Canada, where I've taught printmaking, but we don't teach this experimental stuff. But I thought it'd be really great for us to kind of embrace the creativity that's happening in all the work today, that's going to be happening in the Culinary Festival, and see what happens when we bring it together. Okay, so this is the good stuff. This is the maple syrup I brought all the way from Canada, and it leaked in my luggage. But everything smells delicious now at this point. So this is something we're going to use, but I'm also going to talk about when we get to this point, how if you can't get maple syrup, what else you can use. I'm very lucky that maple syrup is relatively affordable in Canada. It literally grows on trees or in trees. But if you can't get it, we'll talk about a few other things that you could work with as well. So one of the other non-kitchen equipment we're going to use, and this is optional. So this is gum arabic, which is used in a lot of printmaking techniques. So we're going to be doing lithography that is hydrophilic and hydrophobic. So that means we're going to be working with what embraces water and what rejects water. So this is a commonly used art supply. Didn't open it, should do that. Commonly used art supply, but it's only going to just help us. So we could do this, and I've done it a couple times. The examples I'm going to show you, I didn't use it. So if you can't get a hold of this, that's okay. We also have a kitchen scouring pad. In best case scenario, you would have one with even a finer little loop of wire, but I just took whatever I had in my kitchen at home, and we'll be able to still work with this. So really embracing the experimental in this, see how it changes what the process we're doing it is, and how we can just embrace all our little happy accidents that happen throughout. Aluminum foil. This is going to be one of the key pieces that we're going to be using in our lithography printing today. So we're going to use this piece of acrylic that I have. I know not everyone has a piece of random acrylic in their house. I feel like at least Jordana does. I do. But you can really use anything. You could use an old book if it's flat. It's probably going to be a little messy, so something that you're okay with getting a little messy. A cutting board would also do. So we're going to be combining these two simple things to be able to make a printing plate. Also good old masking tape. We're going to be printing later with this wooden spoon I bought at the dollar store. Often in printmaking, we actually use shot glasses to measure, but today we have these, so it's going to be a real good party because these are quite large shot glasses. Yeah. I have another technique that we'll jump to later. And then for drawing materials, you can use anything you have at home. You can use regular graphite. You can use wax crayons. You can steal them from some children. But we're going to also show today how you can work with transfer paper. I have in my handy little travel container a oil pastel. And then we have what is called a China marker, a resist marker. So all of these are made of materials that are going to resist water, right? So that's something we're going to keep in mind when putting together this process. So I'm also going to be using some basic Strathmore print paper. If you somehow get into this and you want to do it all the time, I do suggest getting something a little fancier than this, a little thicker, but always go for a cold pressed paper. It's always going to be really helpful. And then just to have on hand a couple different buckets of water. I brought this flat, I don't know, this is actually like a storage container for like putting cutlery in. I'm gonna use this as to create a bath with the Coca-Cola, and then just some sponges. And then handily some towels for when it all goes wrong. So like I said, this is a very experimental process. I don't want to not hype it, and I don't want to hype it too much, but it might not work every time. So we have some time to experiment together. So I'm going to be wearing these nitrile gloves just because, as I said, we're working with hydrophilic and hydrophobic processes. That means anything with oil is not going to print, and my hands are filled with oil. But you also get to watch the fun journey of me complete simple tasks with gloves on, and it makes it way harder. But sometimes, like when I was testing these, I escaped. I took the gloves off. So it's just, if you want to learn and understand the process, you don't need to keep the gloves on because you're going to want to have that freedom to be able to mess around with things. And also it'll help you actually see how much the fingerprints do transfer. But right now we'll try to do it like this. And because I know the hardest process of all to do with the gloves is tape, peeling the tape, I did in advance make myself some strips over here. Okay, so what we're gonna do is start prepping our plate with some foil. So I don't know how much you guys have paid attention to foil before, but if you look, there's one side that's a little matte and one side that's a little shinier. We're going to be wanting to be working with the matte side. And also I see people taking notes, which is amazing. If you ever want to watch more things on YouTube, you can search kitchen lithography or kitchen printmaking. Also some good friends of mine who run an artist residency in Picton, Ontario, they have made multiple videos where they mix and match and play with these different materials. So if you don't have access to anything. Oh, I forgot. I also brought, all the way from Canada, exploding in my luggage, as you can see, tapioca flour. If you don't have tapioca flour, you can use baby powder, but I was really embracing the kitchen theme. I like to take a theme very seriously. So here we have tapioca flour. At home, I'd buy this at the organic store. I don't know, they also have it on Amazon, but they charge like 5 times as much. But if you're ever looking for it, but in a pinch, baby powder is fine. Just keep in mind that whatever you make is gonna smell like baby powder. So this is nice. It's a more milder smell. And then if you actually wanted to be using in your kitchen, fully admit I have no idea what the practical application for tapioca flour in your kitchen is. So I'm sure there's great things you can do with it. Okay, so we're gonna take some of the tin foil. Now, every little crease in this will show up in your print. For the purposes of today, we're just experimenting, we're playing around, we're starting to learn. We don't want to be too worried about getting these crinkles, but if you were at home and you really, really wanted a sleek, nice print, you'd want to get an X-Acto knife and not tear like I just did. Okay, so as you can see, we have the shinier side and the slightly more matte side. So we're going to do matte side up, but we're going to do everything upside down. So us printmakers like to do everything backwards and upside down, and I feel like as I said that out loud, I feel like I was accidentally making like a euphemism, but that's not what I meant. So here, and in the kitchen. So here we can just flip it over and put the matte side down. And then one trick you can do and this is where things start getting a little messy, we can moisten just a little towel and just put a little bit of water. That's actually probably more than we need. A little bit of water on your plexiglass, your paper, whatever you're doing. I don't know where his video's going. That's fine. Oh, okay, wonderful. Oh, right, I'm up here. So what you're going to do is place this in the middle of the foil you have laying down. And so because of that little bit of moisture, it's actually going to start sticking to the paper. So that's just going to make your life a little easier because it won't be sliding around, and hopefully it'll be making a tight seal. So I'm going to fold it, so anyone who has ever panicked and last minute wrapped Christmas presents or anything like that, you're going to be very familiar with just quickly wrapping something. So I'm going to go over to where I have tape already. And you want to make as much of a tight seal as you can. Here you go. And then just fold on all sides. So if you really you're someone who doesn't like getting messy, and you're going to see this is getting messy pretty quick, you're going to want to seal it completely, excuse me, with the tape. We're not going to be as careful today, but if you're really doing this at home and you actually want to make a plate, you may want to print a bit today and then print again in the future. You just want to make sure you have a tight seal of the tape. All right. So I'll hold this up. This is my haphazard taping. And then here's the front. So as you can see, we have a little crinkle. That's fine. We can embrace it. Because the water's still under there, you can also move it away if you want, but you don't have to worry about it too much. But everything will show up in your print. So it's kind of fun to embrace all these little marks as well. So the water will still be keeping it tight underneath. And if you want, you can move the water to the side to make a tight, flat drawing surface. And here's the slightly time-consuming part. We're going to take our little scour pad. So don't use one of the ones with soap in it, okay? And then you're just going to very gently create little, I'll hold it up too. We're going to be scoring the surface. So even though we already are working with the very porous matte side of the foil, we're also going to be adding to that. So this is almost like if you've ever worked with watercolor paper and the paper has a bit of a tooth to it. We're going to be creating that on here. So I'm just going to put it down to finish the job. So if you were able to look really closely at this, you'll see there are little loops and marks as I do it. If you were doing this later, you could experiment with using a steel wool with a really fine grain as well. Or it's almost like cleaning, which is non-enjoyable. So this is all part of us preparing our plate to be able to hold our drawing, what we're going to be doing on here. So the more porous it is, the more all these tiny little dips and porous spots of this panel are going to hold our waxy material. Okay, we could do more, but we don't need to for the sake of the demo. Okay, so as you can see here, it's gotten even more matte. Also, while I was doing it, I was able to smooth out some areas. And then what you want to be doing is just having fun and drawing on top of it. Okay, so maybe later we can have some people come up and play around and draw on some things, but I'm first going to just lay some shapes out and drawings here. So using my oil pastel and thinking about anywhere that I put a mark is where the ink is going to go. So I'm purposely just doing something really bold, knowing that we're going to be playing around and working with subtle lines and kind of thinking about how it's going to make an impression. You may see this and say, Jenny, did you do 7 years of art university? And yes, I did. But this is what it gets you. So thank you, Mom and Dad, for that first few years of my university that you paid for. And then thank you, Ontario government, for the loan you gave me for the rest. Yeah, still paying for that. Okay, so I put it mostly with the oil pastel, but I'm just going to put just a few little marks with the China marker. And I'm really just trying to get anything down so we can see a variation in line. So we have both of our things here. So in theory, this is the image that we're going to see at the end. Fingers crossed. So keep in mind, this will print backwards. So obviously, this is just a few doodles, but if you wanted to include any text, you're going to want to flip it. And that's when using the transfer paper could come in really handy, especially if you already have a drawing or you printed off a photograph that you'd like to trace. You know, I know we have this beautiful masterpiece so far, but if you want something much more detailed, much more accurate, you can simply just trace what you want to be getting by using the transfer paper. Okay, this is when we start to get a little messy. So we want to have a lot of paper towel on hand. I have a secret garbage back here that I'll be throwing everything in. So we're going to take just a tiny bit of, if you were doing a regular litho, this would be talcum powder. We're using the tapioca powder. You might use baby powder. And I'm just putting it down on the plate. So what this is doing, it's gonna, once I start getting crazy and putting all these different materials and things on here, this is actually just going to be protecting my drawing a little more than the oils that are already in the materials that I drew with. So what I'm simply going to want to do is spread it out onto the drawing. It is a little hard to see, so you have to just be a little trusting that it's working. And you don't want to be applying much pressure, you just want sort of a soft touch to be spreading it around. Okay, and then you just want to tap off the excess. Okay, so you can't really see much of a difference, but if you were to pay really, really close attention, you can see there's a bit of a dusty mask that's sticking, hopefully mostly only to the drawing areas. Okay, this is when it's going to get super Canadian in here. I'm going to bring my maple syrup. It's going to smell great. If you don't have maple syrup or you have to pay crazy import prices for maple syrup, I got a bunch here that you guys could fight over. Also, corn syrup might work as well. Probably not jam. I've heard people experiment with honey, but you know, swing by the IHOP, get anything you want to put on some pancakes, and it should do the trick. Okay, this is the scary part, because this is when you start destroying your image. So I'm going to just pour a little bit of this on top. And then I'm going to use another paper towel to spread it around and get everything all sticky. So you can really just focus on the area you've put your drawing. And you can give it a moment to you know, kind of soak around, absorb into the areas where you've already put the oil down. And if you look really closely, I think you may be able to see, you'll see it starting to resist, right? So it's starting to make even accentuate where we've been putting down our materials. So I'll go to my secret garbage. Ooh. Okay, so this is also going to be on here to protect it when we get to the heavy-duty step coming up next, which is the Coca-Cola. Yeah, I wish you guys should smell this. It's great. It smells like breakfast. Okay, so one thing I'm going to do is just try to put some heat on it to try to melt in the image just a little bit. I've done it before without this step, so if you aren't able to do it, that's fine. It's also helping me put tapioca powder all over the stage for people to enjoy later. Okay, so now we're going to take it over to this tray I brought. Okay, who wants to help out and do a timer for 5 minutes? Okay, Jordana, you win. I'll tell you when to start. Okay, so now we're going to bring out the most important ingredient, Coca-Cola, that I asked the hotel staff to get me from the back. So like I said, you want to make sure you get the real stuff. Full sugar, full caffeine, full whatever's in here. Probably some more corn syrup. I don't know, you can ask the Coca-Cola people later. Okay, so this is the exciting part. I don't know if you'll be able to see from here. So what we're gonna do is actually just pour the Coke to develop our plate. So, can you guys see on the screen? Yeah, so it's bubbling here. And what it's actually doing is etching in to parts of our image. So with a combo of the bubbles and all the sugar in there, this is like that demo that we all had in, oh yeah, Jordana, 5 minutes. Yeah, sorry. This is all like that demo we all had in grade school where they said if you put a tooth in here, it'll eat it overnight. Well, I guess that's true, because it also happens that it's eating through all that stuff we put in there, being drawn to the waxy materials that we put in. So I put about 1.5 cans, and then what I'm going to just want to do is keep it moving within here. So as it goes over, it's slowly working its way through the image I made. So this is the part where we can reflect about our eating habits and what Coca-Cola may do to our body, but all its magical properties that it can do. So you want to try to keep it as covered as you can. And I can see that there's little bubbles forming where it's sticking to the ink. That's where it's doing its little magic here. And you want to try to get those to move, but also let them be digging in. So keep in mind, we're using it like you would use acid in a lithography process, which is scary. So we have all these things in our house that can be able to produce images like this. How much time are we at? Left? Okay. Here we go. So the longer, the better. When I tested this at home, I only did about 3 minutes, because I hadn't done this in a long time. But eventually the bubbles and the carbonation and some of the things in the Coke that are eating through the foil that we've put down, it will stop doing anything. So in a way, you can't do this for too long. So if you do it, and this may happen to us today, and your image is a little grayed out or it's not dramatic enough, what you'd want to do is actually keep it in your Coca-Cola bath for even longer. So I can already see that some of the areas where it's started to kind of etch into the foil, but also I can see it's obviously bubbling way less. I also decided to put this under the sun, so it's quite hot doing this. I advise doing it in air conditioning. So what I also have on hand here is some water. It would be best to do this with either filtered water or Oh shoot, what's that water that you get like at the pharmacy? Distilled water. It's best to do it with distilled water, but we're gonna just try it out with any type of water today. Of course, it's gonna change wherever you are, you know, what the plumbing's like, what the filtration in your town or city that you live in are. So we're gonna find out how good the Baja Mars filtration system is today. I'm sure it's great. Yeah. So what we're gonna wanna do is this Coke, like I said, it will continue working into the plate. So if you leave it in, it would continue etching into what you're doing. Okay. Should we all do a countdown? So you're gonna see I have two things of water here. So one of them is where it's gonna get dirty and there's gonna be Coke buildup in it. And then the other one that I'm gonna be using to be keeping my plate wet while I'm printing. And before we start doing that, we're gonna put a little of that gum Arabic in, just to help with our resist. It's gonna help with the contrast, because like I said, this is not a foolproof technique. So we can take any like favors and help upping the contrast wherever we can. I also have to admit, when I was testing this back out at home last week, I also drank like 3 cans of Coke while I was doing it. So that is like a little side benefit of the process. Oh. Thank you guys, I admire the support. Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna just tap it to get as much of the Coca-Cola off. This is when, if this is something, like you can see on the back, there's some Coke that's stuck under the plate. That's okay for today, but if this was something you're like making a really precious image, if you sat here and drew it for a while, that's when you're gonna wanna make sure it's all sealed in the back. So we're gonna do a quick sponge drip to get the Coca-Cola off. So we're just doing a bit of a minimal clean. We're still not rubbing it yet. I can touch the sides of the panel because I have the gloves on, so it won't be picking up my fingerprints. But if you wanted to be extra careful, you can just hold it on the side. Okay, so now we have our washed off plate. And then this is where it gets extra stressful, because this is when it could all go horribly wrong and there's a whole bunch of people watching me. Okay. Okay, let me check my list. Yeah, okay, so we're gonna pull out the vegetable oil, and this is when we erase our drawing materials. So we might be about to lose it all, which is fine, because if that happens, we realize, okay, there were a few things we could have changed. So one of the things we could have changed was used filtered water, but we're not gonna mess with that today. But another thing you could also change, a variable to play around with, is maybe more time in the Coca-Cola. Okay. So we're going to use a paper towel to spread this oil around, and it's gonna start erasing our drawing. So if you can see, I don't know how detailed it is, you can see even though I'm taking away the drawing material, so the blue and the green of my drawing material disappearing, there's a slight ghost image. That's a good sign. That means something has worked to some degree. So the China marker is harder. It's a lot more of a stiffer drawing material, so it's harder to get off. So I'm going to keep rubbing that one. But the oil pastel comes off a lot easier. And like I said, I wasn't being, overly cautious about crinkles or anything in the foil, so they're going to hold some marks, but we're going to embrace them. Just like if you're doing real stone lithography, it'd be really nice to get some of the patterns of the stone and the history. An individual stone in stone lithography can make hundreds of thousands of prints. So it's really amazing to think about over even centuries how many different people and who has used that in the past, and what different images have been created, all from the same stone. So I'm just working to remove as much of the green China marker as I can. It will still work though if I don't get it all. I think the more I say it will work, I feel confident and less of the chance of making a fool of myself. Okay, so I'm just going to remove the extra oil. And so now this is going to be a light film on here, and basically from now on, and so you can see that it's picking up the color of my drawing material. It's not going to print this color. It's only going to print the color of the ink I bought. I went with good old black. But this can help you if you want to be doing a drawing with different elements. You could be using the different colors to know what part's what. Just going to take a moment to get the oil from underneath, so we're not getting even more messy as we get to the real messy part. Really sorry to whoever's in charge of cleaning the tablecloths. Okay, so this oil is going to be sticking on here. And so basically from now on, the plate, parts of our plate on the outside are going to be resisting. So we're going to want to be keeping it wet. So one thing we're going to want to do is to this water that we have that we're going to sponge with, we're going to add a little bit of gum arabic. So this is where you could use your shot glass and use about a shot glass amount. I'm going to guess that that's about a shot glass worth. We're going to put it in here. I have some other uses for these spoons I have planned for later. So we're just going to kind of give it a whirl instead of stirring it. But we're going to dip a sponge into this, so it's going to still get mixed up with the sponge. So grab one of my sponges here. I'm going to dip it in. And then I'm going to start just wetting the plate. So this is going to want to be wet all the time, at least to some degree now. And you're going to see it's a really fine balance of being too wet, too dry. So it's something you're going to have to just feel out in the process. Get this out of the way. Okay, so we're going to get the ink ready. Like I said, I unfortunately didn't buy a good quality ink, but this is something hopefully will work for our purpose today. What you really want to be able to get, though, is ink made for lithography. So it should also always be oil-based. So make sure you're not using a water-based ink. The annoying part of that is water-based ink is what you can buy most places. So you got to kind of keep an eye out, plan ahead, and get an oil-based ink. So I'm going to just put a little bit. I had another piece of acrylic at home. Like I said, I know this is not a normal thing people have, but you can take a piece of glass out of a picture frame. It might not go back the same way. If you use green ink or red ink, it's going to tint that glass forever. That's all part of the fun trial and error. So what I'm going to do is start spreading out this ink. So we're going to want it to be pretty thin. And what I've been finding is this technique with the foil here can be really, really fickle, so you want it to be much thinner than you think you would want it. If you want, you can also add a little bit of the tapioca powder to your ink. So we're going to start trying to print and see if we get anything here. So I'm going to go back. Remember, we're always now going to be multitasking, keeping our plate wet, like if anyone has done stone lithography before, this is where you'd be keeping your stone wet. And then I had already pulled out a few pages of my paper, so I'm going to have one here. And if you have a press, like I know there's one here on site at the Current, if you were here, you could use that. We're going to use the spoon. You're not going to get as crisp an image with a spoon, but like I said, I take a theme seriously, so I've really embraced the spirit of the festival. Okay, so before I get to the really scary part, I'm going to give a little more water here. And then I'm going to go get a tiny bit of ink. We can start with small amounts. And I'm going to start just slowly. Oh my gosh, it's working. We're going to just slowly start putting the ink onto the plate. Now I mentioned I didn't get the best ink. The sad part is we're not going to get a really really black image today, but we're going to get something that's going to transfer our ink. So, I mean, I don't know what you guys think, but I'm pretty sure this is magic. We're really creating an alchemy here of just using these materials we have in our kitchen as printmaking materials. You're going to want to keep wiping it, both to keep it wet and to also remove excess ink in your non-printed areas. So that means the areas where you don't want ink to be. But what I always think when you're doing these experimental techniques is kind of embrace those little marks, those little wrinkles, those little things that just come through. Because if you want it to be perfect, you could go take a course on how to do this properly, which, I mean, I highly recommend as well. And I'm sure there's a great itinerary of classes at the Current that you could take. But we're just playing around. This is something really great to do on a Sunday afternoon, whatever it may be. So we're going to just embrace the marks that we have here. But it's exciting to see we are getting the results we want. I'm not going to worry too much about getting it super even throughout the plate because I kind of did a kind of rough doodly drawing in the first place. And if you wanted, you can just do a little more moving little dots. This is also a point that if you did get little fingerprints everywhere, you could just give them a little wipe away. Okay, now here is the part where you wish you weren't sitting under a sunroof. You're going to take your paper. It's going to get wet. Don't worry about it. You're going to line it up. I purposely cut my acrylic to the same size as my paper to make it easier for me. But I know not everyone has a laser cutter in their house. But when, eventually we all will. I think that's a technology we'll have. But it really doesn't matter. But sometimes you can put a piece of tape down around the size of your paper, and that way you're registering, you're putting a line where you know you want to put it. So once again, the paper is kind of sucked down by the water, and we're going to just start rubbing it. So I'm doing the work that a printing press would do in 2 seconds. I'm doing it with the elbow grease. And you want to kind of use one hand to keep it in place to make sure your image isn't jumping around. Like I said, we're embracing the experimental aspect of this. So if it does, that is fine. And we can take a little peek. Working. But obviously we need to keep rubbing it. So it's good to keep going in a circular motion, so you're distributing the weight. I'm kind of ignoring a whole half of the drawing here. But if you hold it pretty still, you can also peel it up and cheat and see what's working. This is the part where it's great to do it to music, kind of like exercising. You can motivate yourself. I am pushing pretty hard. I will admit I'm not the strongest person, so probably the stronger the better. Invite some strong, tough friend with big arms over and be like, oh, I'm just working on this print. Oh, by the way, could you rub this for like 5 minutes? Thank you. So if you do have a press, and you can even buy some at home, like to have at your home, they usually do cost about a couple $100 though. You will get a crisper image than we're going to get today, so if that is something you want to plan down the road, if you fall in love with doing things like this, that's a way you can kind of scale up. Okay, I think we're pretty good. I'm sure there's one area that I haven't given enough of a rubbing to, but I think for our purposes today. Okay, are we ready for the big reveal? Da-da-da, and this is my masterpiece, my doodles inspired by sitting on the phone as a teenage girl in the 90s, drawing hearts and squiggles. So we got my little throwback image. Ooh, we did it! Guys, this could have gone horribly wrong. So as you can see, the ink did get stuck in the crinkles, but it's kind of cool. Like I said, I was letting it happen too. You could even roll up your ink with multiple colors. You could do a rainbow roll, so that rainbow would transfer to this as well. Like I said, unfortunately, the images, the colors that you draw with don't translate. It's all about the colors of your ink. So remember, we did these big squiggles with the China pencil, and we did these triangles that look like a coffee cup from a bodega in the 90s, or like a stationery set. We did that with the crayon, the wax pastel. If you did it with a crayon, you'd even get that cool, like, child drawing patchy technique. So that would be really cool too. And guys, I also have to say this actually turned out way better than my test, which is this one, where I drew a sad face because it wasn't working. But what I did change between this one and this one is I left it in the Coca-Cola bath for longer. So that means it was etching into our plate for longer. And then also, the gum Arabic was a bit of a cheat because I did break the rule of only working with things in the kitchen, but it did help get that contrast. So if you had somewhere, you might want to lay this under a book to dry. We won't worry about it today. But that's kitchen litho, so pretty exciting that that worked out. And for the final little bit, I do have one other little tip or something to show you. And this is something that I was thinking about, how can we embrace printmaking techniques, or how is this something that we can do with people of all ages with what we have at home? And I remembered I was lucky enough years ago to be teaching art in Italy. And if anyone here's been to Italy, they love bureaucracy. And if you ever want to get anything done, you have to go to 5 different offices, get permission. And some of my students really wanted access to printmaking studios. They wanted to do relief. But then they just gave up because it was so tough to get access. So one of my students devised this super, super easy technique that I've actually embraced in my own artwork. I've seen many of the students I studied with. So I just wanted to share with you guys today because it's super easy and something you could all do and you could go home and do right away. So I just took some boxes I had at home. So thinking we're going to make an invisible relief print here. So if you don't have the ink, like I said, I had to order, I had to wait for it to come, and then I said, oh, this isn't the best ink, but I waited 2 weeks for it to arrive, right? So if you want to just if you only have paper, you only have pencil, you only have scissors, this is another technique you could do at home. So, like I said, I cheated, I have a laser cutter. So I just cut these into cardboard. You do a cereal box, you can do like this is I bought some shoes, as I tend to do, and then I cut that as well. You want to get a box that's pretty dense, so a hard corrugated. So you know when you pick up probably like an Amazon box and it's like kind of squishy, that's not going to work as well as something hard. But you can easily do this just with draw on the paper and do it as an X-Acto. But for the sake of time, I made some images virtually, and then I cut them with the laser cutter. But you can do this all by hand. It's super easy. Like I said, you can do this with all ages. Of course, you don't want to give a kid an X-Acto knife, so that might be the parents' part. But the kids could draw it out, draw a stencil. You also have an awesome stencil for doing spray painting later. I mean, am I encouraging you to graffiti? I don't know, but maybe. So what you simply do is, for instance, so I told you I love a theme, so we have our culinary and art images here. And what you do is you're actually going to create an invisible image like this, where you can enjoy from either this side or this side. I don't know if you guys can see, maybe put in the sun. So this is something you can actually make quite intricate images out of just by pressing this through the cardboard with a spoon. So I'm going to show you that really quickly, just because I wanted to share this with you guys. So for this one, I use a watercolor paper because it is softer than a printmaking paper. So that printmaking paper was made for me to be sitting there rubbing it like a fool for like 4 minutes. This is going to be meant to be more flexible. So it's a lightweight watercolor paper. Just keep in mind you don't want to tear the paper. We're still going to use that elbow grease. But here's a few little things that I was playing around with before. This is just rough. But we're going to take, oh, I already pulled some out. And you don't need anywhere special to do this. If you're super, super lucky and have access to a light table or even a window or somewhere where you can lay, I like to lay flat. I know some people who do this up on a window, but I really like to lay flat when I'm doing it. So you just say, okay, I want to put this knife in the center of my page. I'm going to just put this back down just because I'm working on a squishy surface up here, but if you're on a regular table, you can just work right on the table. And I'm going to flip it. So I'm going to line up where I want. If I want, I can take that tape I had from earlier. Oh, also, if you don't know this tip, if you don't want your paper to stick to your tape to stick to your paper, just put it on some fabric and grab some of the lint, and it's going to help your tape not be as sticky. Also, if you have painter's tape, that works really well. So I'm just doing this to hold it in place, because when you start, you're going to be working blind. So on this side, I'm going to work on this knife image. I'm going to kind of feel where it is. I can hold it up to light. This is where it comes in handy that I'm melting under a sunlight. And then I'm going to take, I got 2 different sizes spoons. I just bought these at the dollar store. So I'm going to start with this small spoon. If I had bigger parts of the image, I could use the bigger spoon. And I just want to see where my image is. And slowly, I don't know if you can get this on the camera, start rubbing. Now you don't want to go too hard right away because it's going to be a little, it could tear your paper. And honestly, if you tear the paper a few times, that's fine, because you just want to be getting a hang of this. And you kind of feel out, the spoon will kind of find where the edges of the cardboard are. So this is why you don't want to use too soft and squishy of a cardboard, because it will just collapse under you pushing on it. So you want something that will hold up to you rubbing on it. So what I'm doing is I'm simply just tracing along the edge, literally embossing the paper in with the spoon. So I didn't need any special materials for this. I could just do what I had in my home. Of course, you'd probably need an X-Acto knife, so that might be something if you don't already have in home. Okay, now I'm going to move over to the handle. I forgot where it was, so I'm going to hold it up. So I've already pushed on this part. And so this is a smaller area, so it's really nice to have the little spoon here. And we might actually, when I pull this out, have a bit of a gray outline. That's also because I did cheat and use the laser cutter. So it's not always great to cheat, because now I'm going to have a bit of a dust from when it burnt the cardboard is going to stick to it. So that's why I brought like 20 erasers. But if you were to cut this just with an X-Acto knife, you wouldn't have to worry about all that. So it's a trade-off. So I'm just going around making sure that the more I rub it, the more crisp the pressure I make is. It's very organic. You kind of feel it out. And there's, it's just a made-up technique. There's no right or wrong way to do it, so you can kind of feel it. You can also later go through, even with makeup or anything else, and almost like dust through this, and it will pick up the shadows. Okay, so when I look at this, I see I just have a little bit of an indented surface. So I'll take it off here. And then we have a cool little print, like this. And so you can look it on the back. If you look really carefully, you can see where I move the metal around. So I usually like to see it on this side. But you can make a cool little image of anything you want. I've even done this with tiny little writing. And then you can even just play around with using the back of your spoon, the side of your spoon. For bigger areas, a bigger soup spoon works really well. Yeah, so those are just 2 techniques I wanted to show with you guys. You don't need to be an experienced printer. As I've displayed here, you don't even need to bother drawing well. These are things that you play around with home, with things that aren't going to be wasteful, because you're probably going to use them for something else, whether it's eating, other art projects, cleaning up even, whatever it may be. But there's going to be ways that you can experiment and create with things you can find in your kitchen. So I thank you guys for joining me. If you want to come up and look at these things, probably it's easy if you have any questions to come ask them up here. But come check out what we have here. And yeah, it was great that you guys joined us today. Thank you.